blessing for Sukkot, of being in a sukkah, of dwelling in a sukkah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu le'shev basukkah. Let's go ahead and shake the lulav and the etrog. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu al netilat lulav. Starting with the east, going to the south, to the west, to the north, up towards the heavens, down towards the earth, shaking in our hearts. I hope that you're having a Sukkot filled with blessing. Friends, I am here in my Digital Sukkah right now in Greensboro, North Carolina, and the marvels of our times have also brought me into a place that I know really, really well, which is into the living room of a very, very dear friend. And some of you actually have met her also, because a number of years ago, Rabbi Susan Silverman, a classmate of mine from our days back in rabbinic school, Rabbi Susan Silverman lives in Yerushalayim, in the city of Jerusalem. So some of us who have traveled to Israel have actually been in that same living room and spent time with her and her amazing family. Susan also came to Greensboro as she was talking about a book that she came out with called Casting Lots, which tells her own family story and about building a family through a combination of a variety of things, both biologically as well as through adoption, but also telling part of the adoption story of her family. She is an author, she is a thinker, she is an activist, and above all, she is an incredible friend. So I would like to welcome into the Digital Sukkah today, Rabbi Susan Silverman. How you doing? How you holding up?
Oh, seeing your face, it's just exactly what I needed.
Well, thank you. And I feel exactly the same way. And of course, you know, those who know you here, especially my family, send their regards. Both of our children, when they spent a semester studying in Israel, and they lived on a kibbutz not far from Jerusalem, both of them had been over at one time or another. And you don't live that far from where Michal's family is either, right. In Jerusalem. Yeah, I know, it's like really, really close. And so, you know, we feel a real closeness to you. And so today, really what I wanted to do is just spend this time. We've been talking to people here in Greensboro, you know, part of our extended family here, and you definitely are part of our extended family. Tell me a little bit about Sukkot and about the high holidays in Israel, specifically this year. Now, yours is a house where people come in and out of. You know, again, whenever I'm in Israel, I'll come over for at least part of Shabbat. But you know, everybody's got their own reality. Tell us a little bit personally about how things are for you guys these days.
So, you know, they're okay. I mean, the way I describe it is that our cabin on the Titanic is very comfortable. Right? So like the world's kind of like, God knows what's happening, but we're okay. You know, both Yosef, my husband, and I travel a lot for work, and so we haven't been traveling, and we've been home. So that's been a whole new a new world for us, and it's been kind of sweet and nice. We're both working a lot, nevertheless. Thank God for both of us. Our work continues regardless of COVID. And you know, around Jerusalem, there's been a lot of minyanim, of people just davening, of praying like Shabbat, but also for the Chagim, out on the street, socially distanced from balconies. So behind the back of our apartment are a bunch of balconies, and so there's daily minyan from the back balconies, and it's, you know me, right? So the fact that like most of them are not egalitarian minions. So I just walk around my house like muttering, like, you know, cursing them under my breath. But there are also like a couple of egalitarian ones that when they're out doing their things, it just feels so sweet in Jerusalem to be kind of like walking around the house with the windows open and hearing, you know, the voices together. davening. So I guess it depends who's doing it. It can be very uplifting for me, or I could want to punch somebody in the face. But
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Friday afternoons, I'll be sitting, doing my work at home, and all of a sudden, over my Facebook feed will come like a watch party that Yosef, has put up because there's been an outdoor minyan for a long, long time over at the first station, and so
yeah.
like I'll tune in at times and catch some of the tunes of Jerusalem as Shabbat is really starting, and as I'm, doing some of my preparation towards Shabbat. It's amazing
Oh,
what you can jump and peek in on,
yeah.
what's taking place.
So
Israel's under, what is it? It's a 3-week lockdown right now. Is that
as
correct?
far as we know, I mean, if we had a government that functioned in every way, I might be able to tell you that. But since we don't, things are changing all the time. Right now, it's what's called the Seger, a shutdown, and it's pretty strict. And you're not supposed to go outside of a kilometer of where you live unless it's for something absolutely necessary, the pharmacy or a doctor or groceries, if you live that far. So it's pretty strict right now. And that I think is really good. Of course, like some neighborhoods in Jerusalem are way worse than others. Like where we live in Baca, there are like no cases that come up on the little map. People are really careful here and cautious. We're still demonstrating, so the demonstrations go on, but now that they're neighborhood based, so you go to a demonstration, an anti-BB demonstration, wanting democracy demonstration, and we get there and there's like X's on the ground where you can stand and you wear a mask, and it's within a kilometer of your house. So we've been doing that. And it's sort of like that mix of like tefillah and demonstrating, which is like very Jerusalem.
Yeah, I would say that there's, for those who are following the headlines in Israel, they may know this, but others may not know that there have been, again, because of the many different elections that have taken place, but also, there's charges against the prime minister, and there are a lot of people who have been frustrated with his leadership. That's putting it mildly. And so there have been mass of these protests that have been going on. And so what you're painting a picture of right now is that those protests are continuing, whereas they may have had a central address before. Now under the under the lockdown, or at least under the seger, as you called it, this restricted movement, people are still participating in this now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now you're an activist in Israel. There are many other types of things that you've been involved with in terms of democracy, or in terms of diversity of expression. You've been involved with the Women at the Wall. You and I actually have been
Yes,
with that, but
we started together
that was a long time ago for me. Yeah. But your family also has been involved with environmental activism, and things like that. Tell me a little bit about what it's like these days in terms of those things. I mean, take us into some of that work, and then I want to ask you about other elements of your work.
Sure. So, I mean, Women of the Wall continues as best we can. Sometimes it's virtual, and sometimes it's going there, depending on the laws and the rules and the safety of it. And just kind of plugging forward, like showing up, continuing to show up at the hotel until we can make some systemic change there. I have not been so involved in asylum seeker stuff for a while, only because I've been so busy with work, with my main job, like just insanely. But there's incredible work that I'm, looped into that's going on in terms of asylum seekers, that if anybody's interested, there's a Facebook page called Consortium for Israel and the Asylum Seekers. And it's basically you have to like ask to get let in, but it'll take a day or something. And it's really incredible work happening in terms of asylum seekers, thank God. And it's funny because like having gotten to know asylum seekers over time, like there's a lot of like pretty right-wing sentiments, in terms of the way we think about the world. And I think, God, if Bibi knew, he would give them like the right to vote tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
And just again, so that people understand this, when we're talking about asylum seekers, we're talking mostly about people who are coming into Israel who are coming in there, obviously undocumented, we would use that term here in the United States, but doing so mostly from parts of Africa, if memory
Right.
serves me
And
correct.
Eritrea and Sudan, mostly
Yeah,
Eritrea.
yeah.
Right. And people are not coming in anymore because we built a wall, and also because Sinai is so incredibly dangerous that people have anyway were stopping to come through Sinai because it was just a death trap.
Yeah. Not that long ago, you had a special visitor come on over to your place. I mean, when we had more freedom of movement, and that is Senator Kamala Harris, and her husband Doug Emhoff. Had been over to visit in Israel, and so many of us are used to coming over, as friends, or we're in the neighborhood or whatever have you. But you tell us a little bit about that story.
So they were here. From what I understood, Kamala really wanted Doug to get more in touch with being Jewish and connect to Israel in some way. And so as part of that trip, they had Shabbat dinner with a family who lived in Jerusalem, and that was us. And it's interesting because you know about me that, I'm not a nationalism type person. Like, I think the ideal world is we just kind of can live, like people can live with love. That said, I don't think the Jews should be the first people to give that up, given our history. I think that we have, it's important that we have a space in the world right now. And part of what I was able to share with them that evening was, here I can actually show you, was these candlesticks, to be able to tell the story of these candlesticks, that they came from my great-grandmother Ida, who brought them. She fled pogroms in Poland and brought them to America, and I brought them from there to here. And that the moments when I light these on a Friday night, that's when I feel like, wow, these started out in a village with pogroms, and now they're in the sovereign state of Israel, in my home in Jerusalem. And so I was able to share that, and I felt like this real, and we lit them together, Kamala and I lit them together. And so that was a really kind of like, for me, meaningful moment to be able to share that with someone in the United States who is on the left, and someone who I really believe in as a potential then presidential candidate, to be able to share that, the complexity a little bit of Israel and of our need as Jews for a state. And they were super lovely. And she was talking about really being able to hold the center on the left regarding Israel, which meant a lot to us to hear. Because as you know, there's a lot of, for those of us on the left in US politics, some of that anti-Semitism / anti-Zionism, which I don't really see a difference, is extremely, extremely painful. And she was someone who was really gonna hold a center, not be like a BB pushover, but being a Zionistic left-wing advocate, a partner for those of us in the left here.
Well, again, thank you for that. I mean, I'm sure a number of people have asked you this question about that encounter. It made it into the papers here in the States, and yet, to hear, you personally tell about that encounter is really important, and your voice also has been very important. I mean, I know that I hear you loud and clear about these questions of what's taking place in the American political milieu and some of the concerns that we have. And to hear someone who, on the one hand, you have the things that you're active with in Israel, ways that you see Israeli society, can definitely improve and needs to improve. And yet, on the other hand, there's that line there where you say, no, we're not crossing over here, and we're not buying into the ready tropes that might, throw Israel out and put it into some category where it really isn't, because I think its centrality.
And sort of ironically, also, like that the left, who's sort of most, I think, hateful of Israel, are very white Jew oriented, right? They're not looking at all of who we are at all.
No.
You know, I mean, having hosted lots of people, there was this one African-American activist who was pretty like about Israel, but she, to her credit, came on a trip to learn more. And when I told her that brown and black people in Israel are right-wing voters, she was shocked. It was like, well, why is that shocking? We're not talking about African-Americans. We're talking about Ethiopians. We're talking about Moroccans and Egyptians and these Jews who were really seriously harassed in their native countries or where their parents or grandparents came from. They're not going to have the same point of view because their skin is dark, right? So it's really interesting to be able to sort of like turn these things, and I talked to them about that night, like to Kamala and Doug, like to turn these assumptions on their heads. You know, like you can say, oh, these European Jews came to Israel and whatever. Like, well, actually.
Yeah, you know, again, it's when we zoom out and we show people, you know, what the story really looks like. And I'm so grateful the way that you've done that before, and the way that you continue to do that, you know, in terms of these very complex conversations. I know I found myself in the middle of them, not just on the theoretical level, but really on a very real level. And not often do you have the time to explain to people what things look like. And, you know, you guys have had that time over the course of many years to do it, which is, you were talking a little bit about your work before, and I wanted to go there with you too, because the work that you've been involved with, and you've worked in a variety of different areas over the years, has really been focused on building families and providing, you know, safe and permanent homes for children, you know, within Israel, but also with a lot of that work focused in the United States and in North America through a program known as Second Nurture. Susan, would you take us through that for for a few moments and tell everybody about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So Second Nurture, we partner with communities. Right now, it's mostly synagogues with one citywide choir of all things, but we partner with these communities. We have 8 synagogues in LA County. And what we help the synagogue to do is to prioritize fostering or adopting from foster care among their membership. And that if people have some interest in fostering or adopting, you know, older kids, kids with medical needs, all kinds of kids who are really, really very much need families right now, that the whole community will support those families. So for example, our Wilshire Boulevard Temple cohort, we've got almost 20 families in the cohort. I think 14 or 15 have kids home now from foster care. About half have been adopted already. And the community supports them in a whole variety of ways. So, you know, someone really needed speech and language therapy. They did emergency shelter, and every kid that came through their house needed that. And so someone who's an expert in that volunteered with them, someone from the synagogue. And that person who got involved through being a volunteer is now in the process of adopting a teenager because she got inspired to be part of this. So it's, you know, it's sort of, it catches on. People are inspired by one another. And so we're now working on creating like a big sort of central database of ways for people to offer support to the families. And whenever a family needs something, we just put it out publicly, and always someone responds and is able to help in the way that is needed. Someone had 2 years of a free office space because when their son came home from foster care, took the dad's home office. And 2 years of free office space from somebody. So all kinds of ways. And now with one of our partner synagogues, also in LA County, our big push is getting as many people from that synagogue as we can resource family approved. That's what it's called in LA County. So it's like licensed to foster, because when the restrictions from COVID are more generally lifted and kids come back into their schools, their churches, are seen by social workers, unfortunately, there's going to be a huge influx of kids into the system, because right now kids who are in unsafe households are not being seen by the mandatory reporter. So there's an expectation of many, many children who will be suddenly in the system, and we're going to need a lot of emergency shelter care, a lot of care for kids while the social workers figure out how to best help them, how to best help the family, how to best place the kid, whatever it might be. And so this synagogue is devoting themselves to getting as many people as they can just licensed so that they can provide that emergency shelter temporarily.
Yeah, I would imagine, if you take the greater LA metropolitan area, I mean, this is a significant need. And if we were to zoom out, we would see that this would be the case in other large metropolitan areas also. Although we shouldn't kid ourselves. I mean, this is probably something that even smaller areas could tell exactly the same story. It was fascinating when you were here in Greensboro a number of years ago, and we drew a circle around and we said, well, let's talk to people from our community who have adopted and or fostered over the years. We filled most of our house that day because we wanted to do it as a private conversation. We came over to our home here, not the digital sukkah, but like inside our house. Oh, remember those days, right? When we could like be with each other. And just from our synagogue, which is not a small synagogue, but we are in small town America. Just to see the number of families who have adopted or fostered, that conversation, not, it was one of the first full conversations that we had in my many years, almost 18 years here in Greensboro. Was really fantastic. I'm very grateful for that. But I could see how a model like what you've had could really also be ported to many other places. Is that what the idea is with Second Nurture, that, LA, the greater LA area would be a model that could then be, yeah, that's fantastic.
Absolutely. It's the idea is that we will create the proof of concept, we will create the model for it, and that it can be replicated not just by Jewish communities at all, but by any community. In fact, a lot of the resources that I create for our Jewish communities are Jewishly based resources, but the Catholic Church in LA County asked for them. So I provided to them because they can adapt it. I don't have any kind of how do you say it?
Proprietary, there's no monopoly on
of it. Like I
yeah.
want it to be used for more kids to get families. And
Yeah.
so people, are on our website, you can find all of this stuff, and people should feel free to use it and to promote foster and adoption in their community.
Yeah, and the website is secondnurture.com, I take it?
.org, and it will be, I will send you the link. We need 2 more days.
Yeah, thank you, and we'll definitely be helpful putting it out there. I know that I visited before, and one of the things I want you to flesh out for us, because yeah, I mean, this is a great idea. There are agencies that work with, whether they're governmental agencies or other either local or statewide agencies that work with adoption, foster care, and strengthening families. Where you stand, however, is an incredible thing because you provide resources for Jewish communities. Some of that is like kind of social work-based resources, but others are let's call it advocacy resources. And I want you to tell everybody what that is, right? In other words, Sukkot is taking place right now. I, as a rabbi, or I, as a Jewish educator, or I, as a Jewish family, can find resources that are specifically Jewishly tuned. What am I talking about, Susan? I mean, tell us some of these great resources you put out there.
Let me give you the Sukkot example, and I will send them to you. So if you want to make them available to people to see, they're LA based, but that's okay. You'll get a sense of it. So we made ushpizin, and we have 7 ushpizin, and they're foster care oriented. So the first one is Ruth, and tells her story of being fostered and essentially adopted by Naomi. But the next 6 are kids who are in foster care in LA County who very much want a family. And so it's a picture of each of those kids. It's a little bio about each of those kids, and then a line from Kohelet that relates to that child. And they're designed, as like ushpizin. And the idea is that Jewish communities, whether they're virtual Sukkot, our partner communities in LA County, put them up in their virtual Sukkot, or people at home can print them out to put in their Sukkot at home. And they're all kids who are part of a program of a partner organization of ours in LA County called Kids Save, who are teenagers who really want families before they're not eligible anymore. So Sukkot is a great example, and I'll send those to you so you can share them with your community.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I mean, one of the things that I love about the work that you're doing is that you help to tease out how questions of family building, and as well as seeing parallels to fostering and adopting, how often those are within the within the stories that we tell in the Jewish world. I mean, most people don't zoom out to see that one of the central stories of the Jewish people is an adoption story. I mean, Moses doesn't become Moses if there isn't this incredible configuration to how he is nurtured in his youth and throughout his life at all different points of the way, right? By caring women, by caring families, and also the way that things develop. So, you know, the way that you have helped to shine a spotlight on those stories so that it not only, you know, brings them to the forefront, but also makes the difference in people's lives has been exemplary. I love this idea. I mean, we're talking about Ushpizin, right? Guests at this time of the year for Sukkot. And yeah, it's that real interesting flip that takes place, right? It's just like, okay, yes, we can invite Abraham and Sarah, but in your own backyard, right? There are kids that, you know, not only guests, but are looking for permanency. That's just, it's fantastic. Just fantastic.
Thank you,
So I think, friends, you can see, you know, we have a long-standing connection. Rabbi Silverman and I do, and actually have teamed up on some of the thinking for this. But you know, she is just such a model and a teacher who I think has really brought such goodness and blessing. Before we send off, or at least before we conclude for the day, you know, you have a lot of family here back in the States. I was wondering if there's one Sukkot message or more general message that you want to share with us, you know, before we sign off. Maybe a message of blessing, a message of encouragement. We, of course, feel that a part of our heart is in Yerushalayim. Maybe a little bit of a message for us here in the States.
Okay, well, I mean, I feel like, you know, it's the pot calling the kettle black or whatever, because we're not doing so great here either. But I will give a blessing for those of us in the States and those of us in Israel and those of us in the world, frankly, right now. That, you know, I think at Sukkot we're so raw to the fragility around us, right? That's the sort of the point of Sukkot, is that we are raw to that fragility, that we don't get to live in the space of denial or disbelief, right? But our whole lives in a way now are that fragility, right? Our whole lives are Sukkot. Like, what is Sukkot doing if not rising up something that usually we're not experiencing, but we're so experiencing it now? And I think that, you know, there are so many people in the world for whom that's like their lives. If the vulnerability isn't, you know, a week of the year, but it is all the time. And now it's true for all of us. And I think there are a couple things. One is that I think that can open our eyes to the fragility around us, and what can we do even in the place of fragility to help to give people a place to stand, whether that's kids in foster care or whether that's refugees, like a place to stand in the world, because a place to stand, we realize how important that is. You know before whom we stand is everything. And then that leads to the second piece of it, which I think is that we have each other. Whatever happens with elections, whatever happens to us and with us, we have each other. And so communities like yours, right? Temple Emmanuel is a place where people have a place to stand with each other. And I think remembering that is really, for me, that I'm not alone in this. I've got you, no matter how far away we are. We've got the people who are, who share our values and our vision. And I think that means everything. And we can use that strength to bring strength to others.
Wow. Well, on that note, let me just say Toda Rabbah. Toda Rabbah. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for joining us for this conversation today. Thank you for coming on into the Digital Sukkah. Again, Rabbi Susan Silverman, I know our paths will cross many, many times. I know there's a lot of people from Greensboro, like you said before, who are just looking forward to when we have that freedom of mobility again, because clearly, we have hugs to give in person sometimes too. Well, I truly am grateful for today's conversation. I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for checking in and for listening to this conversation. And by all means, feel free to share this with others. I know that it is part of an ongoing connection that we have, not only to our own story here as a temple, as Temple Emmanuel in Greensboro, but also to the larger Jewish story.
that's at the heart of what Sukkot is connecting to the larger world, and in particular connecting to our people wherever we may be, to our history, and making this world a better place. So on that note, let me wish you Hag Sameach. Share this with others, and we'll see you again real soon.